Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for opening remarks by Councilmember Ben Gray, District 2.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For those of you, y'all can be seated. Everybody can be seated. For those of you who may not know, and I'm sure most of you have heard, our former mayor, Jim Suttle, and one of our former state senators, Deb Suttle, lost their daughter this past week. They found her this past week. And what I would just ask everyone to do here is just for a moment of silence in reflection of the former mayor and former state senator in the loss of their daughter. Amen, and thank you all.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us at this meeting of the Omaha City Council. As a courtesy to those in attendance and to facilitate the conduct of our business, we ask that you please silence all electronic devices. Madam Clerk.
Items 6 and 7 can be considered together for Whorebox Second Edition, Replat 5, located at 1804 Paul Street. Items 6 and 7 are resolutions to approve the preliminary plat and final plat for Whorebox Second Edition, Replat 5. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on items 6 and 7 begin at this time. Are there any proponents?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Natalie Williams. My address is 1700 Farnham Street. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Troy Wendells and Custom Concrete Designs. We ask that you approve the preliminary and final plats. The purpose of the plat is to vacate the existing city alleyway between 18th and 19th Streets. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Items 8 and 9 can be considered together for property located northeast of Cedar Street and south 55th Avenue. Item 8, an ordinance to rezone this property from R4 35 District and R6 District to R5 District. Item 9, an ordinance to rezone this property from R4 District and R6 District to R6 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on items 8 and 9 begin at this time. We have someone registered on number 9, but I don't see the person actually in the, okay. The public hearing begins with any proponents. Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 10, an ordinance to rezone property located at 4117 Charles Street from GI District to R5 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 10 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 10 is approved 7-0. Item 11, an ordinance to rezone property located southeast of 72nd and Farnham Streets from GC District to CC District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on item 11 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Adam Raymakers, 222 South 15th Street, representing City Ventures. Here to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents in the chamber? We have an opponent, Jen Bauer, registered. Ms. Bauer, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Jen Bauer, 5501 Leavenworth Street, Omaha 68106. Speaking to you today as the president of the Exarban Elmwood Park Neighborhood Association in support of the Elmwood Park Neighborhood Association. I'm an opponent of Ordinance 42425. It's my opinion that the planning department hasn't taken the time to ask the right questions, given the appearance of rubber stamping this request. The specific plans have not been reviewed, and that is per the words of the planning board and the planning department, who say, and I quote, "The submitted plans have not been closely reviewed for compliance with the CC zoning regulations. However, it is anticipated that a number of zoning waivers must be approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals to allow for redevelopment of this site. The sole approval of this is because the CC zoning allows for a car wash. In case no one read the zoning code, section 55-403 of the zoning code for GC, which is the existing zoning, it does allow for a car wash as well. In addition, there's been no traffic study. The intersection of 72nd and Farnham is in no way equipped to handle the press of traffic during high traffic times, especially from Starbucks to the north of this intersection, let alone a car wash and detail location. Additionally, during high peak traffic times, we now deal with the traffic light changes north and south, which cause the intersections to be more congested into Dodge. And lastly, the OBRT bus, which was intended to be an option for workers in that area to reduce car traffic, would not be of much use to a car wash that has less employees than the potential office buildings. I don't feel that this change in zoning is necessary, as it's part of the ACI, which is the area of civic importance. This overlay district promotes urban design principles, and this is not an urban design, and it's an unnecessary change. We ask that this request is tabled until a traffic study is completed or supplied and an explanation on the necessity of the change is received. Thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing is closed. Mr. Fanslaw, Planning Director, would you like to respond?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Dave Fanslow, City Planning. I don't know if I'd like to respond, but I guess I'd like to comment on a few things. This site came to us as part of our normal pre-app process. Through that process, we identified that the site itself had to be administratively subdivided, which means we're combining whatever remnants of lots and parcels that are there into one lot. And in doing so, we suggested that the applicant rezone from GC to CC. We typically do that for sites that are close to residential areas in our city, because if you know the zoning code, the difference between GC and CC, GC is a little more, for lack of a better term, a little grittier. There's different uses that are allowed in GC. So when we have the opportunity to request or suggest a rezone to an applicant from GC to something less, we like to do that. It actually protects the neighborhood and the surrounding areas a little better. Auto washing is allowed in both districts. So the request for this rezoning actually came from us to the applicant as part of their site plan review and part of their administrative subdivision. The number of waivers that the Zoning Board of Appeals did grant back in December on this site, if you're familiar with the site, it's very narrow, big grade from this site to the single-family residential neighborhood to the east. So it's narrow. The zoning code, state law allows for waivers to be granted on sites that are constricted. We feel that this is a constricted site, the big 20 to 30 foot retaining wall on the east side of the street. So the lot itself isn't very deep. So if any redevelopment were to happen there, today's zoning code, there would probably need some type of waivers. So there was a waiver, if I remember correctly, to the east for the buffer yard. Again, the single-family residential neighborhood sits 20 or 30 feet above this site, and for some perimeter parking lot landscaping on the west along 72nd. Our urban design staff took a look at this site, looked at the building materials and the site layout, landscaping, and they found it acceptable to support those waivers. And again, the rezoning is really just a down zoning from GC to CC.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Fanslow, if you could stay. My questions are for you.
Great.
Sorry, thank you.
No, you're right.
No, and because and I wanted to just dive into that just a little bit more. In a GC, you said more uses were allowed. So if we did not change the zoning, what are some of those, could you give us any examples of what uses would be allowed in a GC versus a CC?
I can, yes. So, boy, I don't do this very often, but. So what's on the overhead is the permitted uses in the GC zoning district. I didn't go to the bother of printing out the uses that require conditional or special use permit. I thought showing the permitted uses would be sufficient. So all of the uses on this list are permitted by right with GC zoning. The ones in orange highlight are not allowed in CC. So as you can see, there's if it gets rezoned from GC to CC, then auto rental, auto repair, construction services, all the equipment sales and rentals, laundry services, research services, transportation, and custom manufacturing will not be allowed on this site if it's rezoned from GC to CC.
Okay.
So much less intense zoning. Still
Okay.
commercial zoning, but less intense.
So we're eliminating a number of possibilities. But if let's say we didn't rezone, because if we didn't rezone, they could still build the car wash.
Correct.
So whether
Absolutely.
we approve this zoning today or not, they could still build the car wash.
Correct. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay.
And like I said, we like to take the opportunity when commercial zoning is so close to residential property if the opportunity exists or presents itself, we like that down zoning because it does eliminate these uses being too close to residential neighborhoods.
Okay, and I just wanted to make that clear for
Sure.
Ms. Bauer and all of her neighbors, that the vote today doesn't stop the car wash.
You are correct.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
What's the pleasure of the council? Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 11 is approved, 7-0. Item 12, an ordinance to create street improvement district number 2020-01 for the purpose of improving Franklin Street from North 91st Circle to North 93rd Street.
The public hearing on item 12 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Alvin Okereke, 9201 Franklin Street. I'm basically representing myself and my neighbors, so open to any questions necessary.
You're the proverbial neighborhood champion.
I suppose so.
All right. Welcome to the city council.
Say again?
Welcome to the
Oh,
city council.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents?
There's one question I got to ask.
We'll
I
need
live
your
on
name and address first.
Alan Connor, 1705 North 92nd Street. I'm on the corner of 92nd and Franklin. 92nd Street is undeveloped also, and I'm concerned about the drainage from Franklin to Parker and Decatur Circle. Where is that storm sewer water going?
One of the things that by council rule we don't do is entertain a Q&A session format here, but if you have questions about the design or potential impacts on other streets and drainage, we can have someone from our staff who is our liaison with the Public Works Department connect you, and then they can talk
I've already
about
talked
those
to
things.
Heather, and they have not addressed this yet. As a matter of fact, Olson Engineering
if you
was
let
out
me
there
finish,
yesterday
sir.
looking at it.
If you let me finish.
Olson Engineering?
Excuse me. If you let me finish.
Okay.
I was going to finish my thought and tell you that our staff person could get to the Public Works Department, to people in the engineering division that handle issues such as the designs and the runoff and the stormwater components to the system, the more technical details. They can probably get you some more information. So if you'd like to stick around at the top before you leave, we can connect you with that person and hopefully get you the answers. This is just the first step to this process.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, if I could just address.
You have to give us your name again.
Yes, Alvin Okereke, 9201 Franklin Street. This particular, our item on the agenda was a little delayed, actually. And as I was trying to find out an update, I basically lost touch with the Public Works. So actually, this was short notice for me from Public Works. So unfortunately, Alan is actually one of the neighbors I hadn't gotten in touch with since I got notice. But this is, his question is one that I did address with Public Works, and it hopefully will be addressed with, in the design process as you touched on. But of course, until we get to that point, like you guys, no one can really speak on it yet.
Right.
So, but I am looking into that with
Okay.
staying in touch with them.
Thank you. And if the two of you will stay close,
Yeah, sure.
we'll call for any other opponents, and then we have Councilmember Festerson, who represents this district, who wishes to say some things.
Sounds good.
And then we have our chief of staff up there blocking the back door, so you can't get out of here without
Sure.
connecting. So, are there any other proponents or opponents on this item? Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. Yeah, this isn't my district, so I thank you both for coming down and for being here on the project. And I did drive it just over the weekend, and it is a bit of the classic unimproved road situation that we see throughout our city. And there is a fair amount of slope right here, so I can understand the questions being posed about drainage and such. But as Alvin noted there appropriately, that this is just the first step in creating that district, and that designs now can take place should this move forward today and get those answers, I think, addressed for everybody. And I would note that there was, I think, 88% support for starting this process amongst the neighbors. So good job so far. And I'll go ahead and motion approval of this item.
Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12 is approved, 7-0. Item 13, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for the Nowhere Bar located at 3502 Leavenworth Street.
Council members, this is within my district, and before the opening of this meeting and after the pre-council, there were a number of questions that arose, so I asked the clerk if we had time to lay this over to get that information answered, and so it would be my request, someone make a motion to lay over to February 23. And continue the public hearing, right? Same second? Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
And I am required to let anyone know, if you came here specifically to talk on that item, you still have the opportunity to do so, but you will have the opportunity to talk again on the 23rd. Is there anybody here who wishes to still come and speak right now? Otherwise, you can come back on the 23rd. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Item 14, an application to consider a Class CK liquor license for Primos located at 5914 Center Street.
The public hearing on item 14 begins at this time, and we have Travis and Bard Taylor, the applicants, registered. Welcome. We need your names and addresses, please. And unmute your microphone.
Okay, sorry about that. Travis Taylor, 2221 South 60th Street.
Barbara Taylor, 2221 South 60th Street, Omaha, Nebraska.
Thank you. We'll let you know if we have any questions. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I know Mr. and Mrs. Taylor well, and this isn't their first endeavor. I know they've put a lot of time and money into this second location, and we do wish you well, and I'll make the motion for you, Mr. President, to approve.
Thank you. Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Did he stop that? Oh. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 14 is approved, 7-0. Item 15, an application to consider a Class I liquor license for Rednecks located at 3421 South 84th Street.
The public hearing on item 15 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? And we have the applicant registered, their attorney, Mr. Ricky.
Yes, thank you, council members. Ryan Ricky on behalf 409 South 17th Street on behalf of the applicant Rednecks LLC. I am joined here by Greg Leventrate, who's the owner and manager of this establishment. We're happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 15 is approved, 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearing on agenda items 16 through 23 were held on February 2, 2021. Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda items 24 through 54 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or opponent. First, we'll take people that are in the legislative chamber. Anyone wishing to testify on items 24 to 54 at this time? Okay, we'll now proceed to the people registered by Zoom who are requesting to speak and not just be available for questions. Madam Clerk. I think they're all here to answer questions, or is it just Mr. Gawley? Okay. Mr. Kelly, not if you're just here to answer questions. Okay. Same with Danny's Bar and Grill, the manager's application. Okay. Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bill, can you come down, please? I wanted, we talked a little bit about this at pre-council, but asked Bill to come down and talk about items 38 and 42. Wanted to express the need and what we're trying to do to fill that need for many of those who've been affected by COVID. So if you could, Bill.
Yeah, thank you so much. Specifically, I'm going to tack on item 43 too, if you don't mind.
Mr. Lukash, could you identify yourself?
Very sorry. Bill
Yes,
Lukash, Omaha Planning Department.
And you're in the Community
Development Division of the Planning Department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over the summer, the city was awarded, about $10.4 million from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Some of that was Emergency Solutions Grant money. Some of that was CDBG CV money. The ESG is ESG CV. There's a hyphen on the end of it. And all those funds were specifically to address COVID-related problems in our community. ESG focusing more on homelessness and supportive housing for people moving out of homelessness, permanent housing as well. And then CDBG is more like regular community development block grant funds. It can go to a wide variety of things. And items 38 through 42 are ESG and CDBG CV funded, and I wouldn't mind touching on each of those just very briefly. Item 38, No More Empty Pots, that's an amendment to an existing agreement for another $60,000. That is a job training program. Individuals are learning about food, the food business basically, to paraphrase it. But in doing that, they are also preparing food, packaging food, and working with people that deliver food to economically disadvantaged households who may not be able to get out or feel unsafe getting out into the community. So it's a very valuable service. So not only do we have job training, but we have a very important benefit to the community right now as well. That is also matched with $124,000 of private funds. Number 39, North End Teleservices, $250,000. That is a job creation program. NET, they secured agreements with Department of Labor and the Department of Health and Human Services to provide COVID-related services to those departments, and so they needed to train up people very quickly. And CDBG funds have helped them cover some of those costs, or will help them cover some of those costs. One World Health Clinic, $962,000. That's $250,000 of CDBG CV funds. Also, about $700,000 of regular CDBG funds. This is urgent, kind of critical community needs testing, notification and follow-up for people that are affected by COVID-19 or afflicted, I guess, by COVID-19. It's a very important community service that they're dealing with right now. Item 41, match, $3.5 million. Now, previously in last fall, or perhaps last summer, you approved an agreement with them for $1.5 million for rent and mortgage support. We received about $2 million of CDB CV3 funds. These funds are targeted only towards rent and mortgage support, and so they will be, we are amending that agreement so that they can use both pots of money to help with those programs. We did notice the city clerk and the planning department office, city planning department and the city clerk's office, excuse me, that there is a typo in that agreement. It says the Metro Consortium, I'm not sure what the typo is right now off the top of my head, but it's supposed to be the Metropolitan Area Continuum of Care for the Homeless, and it actually says the consortium. So that is an amendment or a typographical amendment, or not sure what the term is, so if someone can help me out with that. But the planning department and city clerk's office is working to get that sorted out, so it shouldn't be a major issue. Number 42, ICA, the Institute for Community Alliance. So for all the ESG funds that we have in our community and all the other funds that go towards supporting homelessness, we have to have funds that have to have a way of tracking all the people, all the data, all the information, and ICA provides that support. It's a very small percentage of the overall program funds that they ask for, and we're very grateful that they're a partner. 43 isn't COVID related at all. It's $500,000 of home funds, but business has gone on even during COVID. Housing is being built. Affordable housing is something that we are always very concerned about. $500,000 for 23 row houses by Holy Name Housing is an important project to address affordable housing in the city of Omaha, and we have a good relationship with Holy Name, and very happy to be part of that project. Until April 29th, I have a little thing I'll put on the overhead projector here.
They'll turn it on for you.
Yeah, thank you. So until April 9th, our application window is open for 2022 CDBG and home funds. The application can be found at that web link on the screen. You can also just type in CDBG City of Omaha, and it's usually the first thing that comes up is our application form. So if people are interested in applying for CDBG and home funds, CDBG is for basically low and moderate income clients, households that make 80% area median income or less. Home funds are for affordable housing, serving that same community more or less. So we welcome applications. We really are focused on affordable housing, I think. Right now, it is such an issue, and home funds, of course, that's their primary goal. And while I'm here, if you don't mind, I'd like to thank my staff in particular, Lisa Smith, Nicole Ingalls, Pat Evans, for all the hard work that they did over the summer. And essentially, they're doing two jobs at once, managing our regular funds and our CDBG, CV, and ESG CV funds. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I would also support all those items, of course, and thank the planning department for all they've done on them and your continued work as we continue to roll out and efficiently distribute CARES Act funding to the community that needs it most. I also just wanted to comment on item number 26 and maybe get a comment from Leslie, who I think is still with us. This is just a manager change at Danny's Bar and Grill, a very popular neighborhood institution. It's at about 72nd and Blondo. I just wanted to make note of it because the longtime proprietor there, Danny Arcuri, did recently pass, and I just wanted to make note of him and all the contributions he made, not only to his establishment there, but the neighborhood, and was a really beloved figure there. So I wanted to note that this time of year, I would usually take a big group of folks in there and have a big lunch, and we'll do that again sometime soon in his honor. If Leslie's available, I'd ask her one question about the ongoing operations.
The clerk is in the process of unmuting her. Ms. LaCoste, you're recognized.
Hello.
Hi there. Thanks for being with us.
We need your name and address.
Hello.
Leslie, if you could provide your name and address, please.
Yes, it's Leslie LaCoste, 9572 County Road P32, Blair, Nebraska, 68008.
Thank you. I thought I'd just make sure that you continue to want to offer the Danny's Bar and Grill as it is and offer one of the best burgers in town.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. No changes?
No changes.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure Danny would appreciate that, and we'll be in to see you again soon.
Thank you so much.
And I would motion to approve items number 24 through 54.
Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 55, an ordinance to amend Chapter 12, Article 3, entitled Prevention of COVID-19, to extend the sunset provision for the mask mandate. A is communications in support. B is communications in opposition. C is amendment of the whole.
Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Move the amendment of the whole.
Okay. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Yes, and I just wanted to make a few comments. First, I offered the World Health Organization and UNICEF recommendations for children in mass, and they recommend that children aged 5 years and under should not be required to wear masks. And I guess the concern that that has been raised by many is that 5-year-olds in pre-kindergarten classes are often with 4-year-olds, and the 4-year-olds aren't required to wear them, and the 5-year-olds are, and it's caused some difficulty for some of the 5-year-olds. And so one of my biggest concerns is just that our ordinance doesn't allow for some common sense exceptions to be made, to where if our county health director had passed this, people could go to her on an individual basis and ask for relief. I'm a preschool teacher, and all of the parents in my class don't want these 2 kids to have to wear a mask when the other 8 don't. And our health director would be able to make those common sense exceptions. Because we had to do this as an ordinance to pass the mask mandate, we don't have that ability. People can't contact the city council and then have us vote on different issues. And so one of the things that I was most concerned about is really just allowing for parents, teachers, administrators to have some of these things come up where they would be able to allow an exception. Right now, if, let's say, a preschool had this issue and they allowed, there was one 5-year-old that was 5 and the rest were 4, and so everybody agreed that the 5-year-old didn't need to wear the mask when the 4-year-olds weren't. If DHHS came in, it wouldn't just be a $25 fine, they would actually be cited, and they could potentially lose their license for just doing something that seemed to be more of a common sense thing. So that's why I was looking to try and tweak our amendment to try and allow for some of these things. For children aged 6 to 11, it is recommended that children wear masks, but I think they've also set out just some things that we should consider when you're dealing with 6 to 11-year-olds, and such as the potential impact of wearing a mask on learning and psychosocial development in consultation with teachers, parents, caregivers, and medical providers. So it's allowing teachers, parents, and medical providers to all get together and decide on different tweaks for kids 6 to 11. So, maybe we don't have them wearing them outside, which that's not part of our ordinance, but that's something that they could decide. They could decide they want the kids to still wear them outside. Again, what I'm looking for is just giving parents, caregivers, and the experts the ability to make those decisions outside of the 7 of us, because we don't have that ability. So that was the purpose, I think, of my supporting this exception for children under 12. It's not to eliminate the mask mandate for schools, nor do we have that ability. The schools get to do what they want. Schools make all their own policies. And in fact, schools can require children all the way to down to the age of 2. They can do more than what our ordinance actually requires. However, they can't do less. And so what we're doing is we're removing the ability for parents, along with their doctors and their school districts and the teachers, to make these decisions. So what I wanted to do is just give a little more control back to them, understanding that Omaha Public Schools will have a mask mandate, that my own son's school will have a mask mandate. And not to lighten it up, but my son who's 13 said, "Really, Mom? You picked 12 and under? Why didn't you go with 13? And I looked at him and I said, "Son, you're 5'10" and you sound like a man. You need to be wearing a mask, so quit complaining." And that was my response to my son. So this isn't something where we're trying to eliminate mask usage for children. It's literally just to give some of those little instances, give parents in the schools the ability to make some of those judgment calls and exceptions. Again, it does not mean that children don't have to wear a mask. It doesn't mean that all businesses can't require children to wear a mask. And again, businesses can require children under 5 to wear a mask if they want to. I was a little upset to see that the library board kicked out a disabled child. Oftentimes children with autism or some other disabilities find it difficult to wear a mask. And what we need to do is maybe carve out an area where a person could go that has a disability or has a child with a disability where the parent's making the mask. So it's some of these little things that I think each one of us, if we're in the situation, we probably would allow. And again, a child that doesn't have COVID can't spread COVID. And so taking into consideration some of those things. And also, when I was looking at it, I also went to the Douglas County's chart, forgive me, because again, I also think that this council, as we consider the mask mandate, and I know we considered it the last time, having a matrix that was offered. And I do think we need to have a matrix. And I believe that matrix, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was that 5% or under. And according to Douglas County, when you look at children, the children are testing positive under the age of 8 at about 3%. And so when you look at the ages, at least the young kids, they're at that level. So what I would like to think about and start talking about is when we have this mask mandate, that we need to start thinking about not having it an all or nothing. I mean, even our state on restrictions has had phases, where we started with, we allowed restaurants, but only outdoor dining. Then we allowed for indoor dining at 25%. And then we allowed, we're moving in stages. So what we need to do is look at what are the matrices that we're gonna look at to be able to reduce it. And so my thought would be, you start with kids because they're spreading at the least and they're testing positive at the least. So look at some of those numbers, and then you, at this, again, it's not saying children don't have to wear masks, but giving some of that decision-making back to the parents and the administration to make those decisions in the best interest of their children, along with the medical experts. And I think we do have medical experts that, have said, I think everybody agrees that mask wearing helps. I think we disagree with how much it helps, but even the studies that were sent to me by people that were saying they're against masks, they say that even in those studies, they'll say that they have minimal protection and that they're at least will help at 14%. So those were some that were sent to me by the people. So even if it's a little bit, I think we're all in the same boat. We want to wear them because even if we're only protecting a little bit, it's more than nothing at all. And I understand that people are disagreeing with whether we should have this mandate or not. And I've been pretty clear that I don't think the government should be mandating it, that we should be following the recommendations of the experts and doing what the experts say without having this city council make it so that you can be criminally cited for and fined if you don't do it. Again, we should be doing what's in the best interest of everyone in the community. And so what I've done is I've reached out to as many people as I could in my district, and we've had these conversations, and we don't always agree. There are some people that just don't think we should be wearing masks at all, but the vast majority think, you know what, we're almost there. The light is at the end of the tunnel. We want to see the College World Series come back. We've got swim trials that are coming back. We've got volleyball, lots of volleyball tournaments, and our economy is starting to come back. And I want to see that continue. And so I understand that we're not necessarily going to agree on everything, but I also was elected to represent the majority of my constituents. And I was also here to represent the kids. So what I'm trying to do today is balance that a little bit, look at the rate of infection with the kids and kind of follow that same matrix that was offered a couple months ago and at least apply that to the children. I think that's what we're going to need to do. I also would like to see more of a matrix in place so people know when it's going to end. A lot of people say, I just want to know when it's going to end. And instead of us picking arbitrary dates that we keep reviewing this, what I think we need to do is work with the experts to come up with that matrix so we have one. I would like, and maybe at this point, it's going to be a percentage of the people that are able and to get the vaccine. That was something that we didn't necessarily have available in our last vote. We weren't sure when we were going to get it. I know that somebody close to me that I have been in fear since this started, that I work closely with, was finally able to get the vaccine just this past week. And the relief I felt, and actually there are two people that I work closely with, that I felt a great deal of relief that they were able to get that vaccine. So I think that this is a conversation that I'm glad that we're having and that we should have. And again, because I've gotten some pretty hate-filled emails from both sides. I'm not wishing to kill teachers, and I'm also not wishing to keep children masked 8 hours a day. We do have some common sense exceptions in our ordinance to allow for children to take their masks off when they can be more than 6 feet apart. I don't know if all the schools are actually allowing that, and they have the right to do that because, again, the school districts can require the masks. It doesn't require a city ordinance for that. So all the teachers can rest safe that even if this were to pass, the children in their classrooms in the school districts would be required to wear masks. However, in those other instances where you have the younger children or you have individual private schools where people have where we heard from people last week that they want to send their children to a different school, that we allow those parents in those schools to make those decisions on their own with their teachers and their medical providers, and that we give them the freedom to be able to do that. They don't get to not, if they want to send their children to Millard Public Schools, their children are going to wear a mask. If they want to send them to Omaha Public Schools, they're going to wear a mask. And I believe even if this passes, if they want to go to a majority of the private schools, they're still going to require the masks as well. And so I just wanted to give a little background on that because I think what I heard last week from the people that came to testify is they feel like they're not being heard, that we're not considering it. And I looked at all of the people that testified and I went through my notes of the people, and about a third of the people that testified, their biggest concern was with the kids and not being able to have any of those exceptions. So what I thought we could do is at least try and work out a compromise to let the people that came down, let the people that have emailed me, that testified at the public hearing know that you're heard, that we hear you, that we do care, and that there are things that we could do to make it a little bit better as we get through what I would like to say kind of the final stretch of this over the next, what I'm hoping, 6 months. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think one of the reasons for proposing this amendment is also to have a conversation about this. And, our job as elected officials is to listen to our constituents, do our research and investigations so that we can make informed decisions. So the amendment that we're considering here today that Ms. Melton, Mr. Palermo, and I asked to be put on the agenda is for that purpose, is to have that discussion. Our numbers are improving. We're in the green phase statewide. Shots are getting put into arms. And I wanted to know if there's something that we consider on the local level that isn't going to add to the situation or add to the increased numbers. And I want people to know that, we've listened to our constituents. I mean, there are many on both sides of the issue. However, I think obviously the majority are for the continuation of the mandate. And that's, in talking with people or communicating with people in emails or on phone calls or even in the produce aisle at Hy-Vee with a doctor from UNMC last weekend. But I think I wanted to at least have this on here so we could have a conversation. I also wanted those, as I think Ms. Melton pointed out too, that we wanted to make sure that those who were heard about wanting the mask mandate and those who are concerned about some of the mental or physical effects it's having on some of our younger youth. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation. I think it's, we hear a lot about, the science, and I want to talk about that for a minute here. I mean, I hearken back to my biology days in high school, which I was a very average student. But I think I do remember that you started out by formulating a hypothesis and then you tested it. And once you came to a conclusion, that doesn't mean that the science is necessarily done. There can be other hypotheses. Help me out, Pete. We had this conversation. What's the plural of hypothesis? But hypotheses, thank you. But my point is once something is satisfied, there's always the opportunity to ask more questions. And I'd say that if we quit asking those questions, if we quit testing, if we quit hypothesizing, then we stop learning. So I'm not here to question any of the people who have come to testify with their science. But I just offer up for conversation that there are others that are credentialed that may have different opinions. So the reason that I think this amendment has the proposal of 12 and under is that if you look at a city like Nashville, which their metropolitan area is probably just a hair less than twice Omaha's, but the raw numbers as it relates to COVID illnesses and rates are fairly similar to Omaha. But since June of last year, Nashville has had a mask mandate, and they've had, as part of that mandate, an exception for age 12 and under. And they've managed it, I think, in very responsible ways. And so one might say, well, that's Nashville. We have a number of experts here in Omaha, and admittedly so, they are. But there are also some experts in Nashville too, and other parts of our country. For example, Nashville, I think, is in the top 25 of funding that it receives from the National Institute of Health, which is, I think, an indication of the confidence that the NIH has in granting research dollars to Vanderbilt University's medical hospital. There are other publications of rankings that have, Nashville in the top 15. So I think part of the point here is that we want to continue to have these conversations and not necessarily just be static. And I think we need to keep questioning, and we need our constituents to keep questioning us so that we can keep investigating, so we can keep looking at different answers so that we don't stop learning. So you look at Colorado, the state of Colorado has their mandate includes a mandate exception for those that are 10 and under. So I wanted to have this conversation. Is it 12? Is it 10? Is it 8? Or could it be 6? I want to have that conversation because I think there are, as there are different hypotheses, or to consider a different hypothesis, there are other investigations that have gone on. So I wanted to have this conversation and know that this has no effect on, as has been pointed out, no effect on schools' ability to make their own policy, for a retail environment to create their own policy, for a business to create their own policy. It is, if you kind of look at it, there maybe aren't all that many that it might eventually affect, but I think it's something that, again, we want to have that conversation and look to see if there are ways that we can phase out of this. So, I mean, this is a fluid situation. We started out with no masks, then it was masks, but it's also, then we found shortages of masks. Dr. Lowe comes up with a way to sanitize used N95 masks at UNMC. So again, with the fluid situation that we're having, I think it's important that we continue to question in a positive way. I'm not saying question someone's results, but to continue to ask the questions, to do the investigations, and to figure out if there are ways to make additional accommodations that aren't going to affect the numbers. So, and then back to the kids. I think we've heard from many, all of us have probably heard from many, about their concern about what this might be doing for the kids. And I'll say, at least on a personal level, and I'll say, proud dad here. My daughter is a senior at Westside High School, and she and two of her fellow students are in DECA and took on a project this year to talk about suicide. There was actually a featured front page story in the World Herald yesterday about their efforts and what they were concerned about. And that's at a high school level, and obviously that's above 12. But we do know that these are having an effect not only on adults with the rise in domestic violence reports and alcohol and drug abuse, also to the high school students, but certainly in younger students too. And you look at, what I've been told from Children's Hospital is that they now see 4 to 5 times the incidence of suicides or attempted suicides over what they've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, which is scary. So again, I wanted to have this conversation. I think it's important that we continue to learn. It's important that we continue to ask the questions and see if there are accommodations that can be made. If the decision is no, then that's the decision. But we all need to keep asking the questions. We all need to keep doing the investigation. We all need to test our hypothesis. So the amendment is for 12 and under. And I know there's a motion and a second. I know there are other lights on. So I think at this time I'll yield the floor. If I may have additional comments later if allowed. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. So I continue to believe this is a simple and practical thing we can all be doing to do our part until the vaccines become available to the general public. And when you talk to the experts, you realize this is going to take some patience. I think our vaccine sites are doing yeoman's work and serving the public very well and dishing out vaccines as fast as they can get them. But this is going to take some time, even just to get through the next tier, Tier 1B. I agree the data indicates that we are making progress, but the positivity rates are still quite high. I want to make sure that the hospital capacity remains manageable during that time frame and that all of our kids can return to school safely. My kids go to OPS. They're scheduled to return full-time here shortly, and that's 53,000 kids in our community. Some of which are back full-time now, but high schools are not yet. I won't be supporting the amendment. The amendment of the whole that's been moved would change the age from 5 to 12. I think it's important at this time to remain consistent with what is working and that people are used to, and not to cause additional confusion between what schools can do and what kids may or may not be able to do at home. And judging by the volume of emails and calls I got last night, my constituents would agree with that and want to keep it in place. The last thing I just mentioned, and I'll yield the floor to, is that, and I hesitate to even address this because I don't think it's warranted and there's no basis in fact, but last week there was an accusation that I have a conflict of interest on this matter. I do not, and I never have. My vote today also does not have a conflict of interest. I did approach the city attorney and also the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission just to address that accusation directly. And 100% both agree there is no conflict of interest. So I just wanted to enter that into the record today as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson. Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too love the conversation. You know, looking back a year ago, obviously our job up here on the city council was pretty straightforward, right? Public safety, police, fire, your roads, making sure your toilets flush, making sure your signals work, making sure your trash is picked up, and then the pandemic hits. And then we find ourselves in this seat of switching gears, and now it's masks for them, against them, right? I mean, we got to make sure our most vulnerable are taken care of. We got to make sure there's kids still in school. We got to make sure businesses are open. So I appreciate the amendment that was brought forward by Councilmember Harding for the simple fact that was mentioned by you and Councilmember Melton both. It's the conversation. There are those that are going to wear masks forever until the end of the world, and that's fine. And there are those that don't wear masks now, and that's fine if they choose as well. And there are those that are just going to wear a mask until the mandate is over. The mandate is not going to end anytime soon, and that's the conversation. But we have to prepare for when it does end, because when it does, when we finally do get these vaccines, and I could really switch gears on why we're even making this decision, but I think I've already did that over the past few months, how, you know, we've been failed. There was a couple people that could have did it before it got to us, and the ball was dropped. And because we believe in these things about protecting our city and protecting everybody, we had to make this choice. So we're sitting up here getting all these emails, all these calls, which is great, right? Put your name on an amendment to make a change to a mask mandate, and you really hear from your constituents. And that's great. That's how it's supposed to be. This is how you make your decisions, because we all serve a different district. And I can explain to you all day long how we need a mask mandate in District 4. It's very easy. I could go for multi-generational families, the zip code with the most elderly workers, obviously the highest rate of free and reduced lunch, and I can go on and on and on. The mask isn't going away, but we have to prepare and have the conversation for when it does, because eventually we're hoping, fingers crossed, that those can get it in gear, that we can actually get this vaccine and get back on the road. We've been failed to this point. And for those who won't come out and say it, I will. We have been failed with those who should have taken responsibility on the mask mandate and those who should be getting this vaccine out. Check the numbers, do your research. the mask isn't going away until everybody gets that second dose. And for us, up till last month, having police officers not even having their first shot yet, I mean, really, that's why we're here, because the mask is not going away until the vaccines get rolled out. Not everybody's going to take them, but when the majority get them, we can open the city back up, and we can get back to what we normally do, because that's what we need to do. But we find ourselves here. We find ourselves here with the mask mandate in front of us. Now, again, I appreciate the conversation. Councilmember Harding, I've heard loud and clear from teachers and parents and people in my district that I just haven't heard from along this whole course of the 6, 8, 10 months it's been about how important it is to have a mask. But if the word gets out and people start talking to people and they say, oh man, Councilman Palermo's thinking about changing this up, now I have heard from them. It's still the overwhelming majority in District 4 to have the mask mandate. Now, I'm not going to support the amendment, but I really appreciate the conversation because, again, we're going to have to figure a way out of this when it comes. So I may have more, but for now, that's it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Vice President Palermo. Councilmember Ben Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me start with, and I'm going to try to be brief as much as I can, but let me start with, I tried to introduce a metric, and we couldn't seem to agree on what the metric ought to be. I still think a metric is a way to go, and I think we ought to be looking at that. I mean, we don't have to, we can look at that again at some point in time, and we don't have to wait until the end of May to look at perhaps maybe a metric, because I thought that if we put a metric in place, then people will know at some point in time when we're going to be done. It didn't pass, and I get it, and I understand the issues around it. I'm not saying anything bad or blaming anybody. I'm just saying I introduced it. It didn't go anywhere, and so here we are with having to do what we're doing now, which I thought was not the best way to do this, but this is where we are. The second thing I want to say is I think people misunderstand not being heard with not agreeing. I hear everything everybody says. I just don't agree. There's a difference between not hearing and not agreeing. And that's where I am. I don't agree. I heard what you said. I've looked at some of your studies. I've even, as a matter of fact, there were a couple of people that came up here and made some assertions about a couple of doctors who I called them personally, and they told me they didn't say that. And so I said, okay, well, maybe that's not, I don't know. But there's a difference between not hearing and not agreeing. I hear everything everybody says, I just don't agree. Part of my concern, Councilmember Harding and Councilmember Melton especially, is that I'm concerned about the new strains. We don't know enough about them yet. And so for me, I'm hearing from the experts, and that's the other thing. We hire experts to tell us, because we are not experts. None of us sitting on this council is an expert, but we hire experts. And I guess I'm trying to figure out why we hire experts and then don't listen to them. Some of us don't listen to them. You know, if we got a problem with the streets, we don't get rid of Bob Stubbe and bring somebody else in or ask somebody else what we should say, what we should do about the streets. I just think when we have experts, and some of the best experts in the world are in this city. Some of the best experts in the world are in this city. And they're telling us what we should be doing. And for me, I have to make it crystal clear to everyone who emails or calls or whatever. I'm going to follow the science. I'm going to do what the experts say. If at the end of this, the experts weren't doing what was appropriate or saying what was appropriate, then we need to look at our experts. But right now, with this new strain, these new strains that are problematic, even for in some cases for the vaccine, some of the vaccines that are out, I have concerns about that. I have concerns about us not listening to the experts. But more importantly for me, in a district like mine, where I have a number of seniors with comorbidities, with that being the case, I would feel I would not be doing my duty. I would not be protecting my district if I gave in to ending the mask mandate. Let me just close by saying, because I don't know that there's anything else I need to say here. I hear what people say, I just don't agree. I am going to follow the science, and I am going to listen to the experts. If we want to discuss a metric, I'm always open to that. And I think that's the way we should have gone in the first place. But we're here now, and again, I appreciate the discussion as well. And thank you, Councilmember Harding, for bringing it, because I do think it's an ongoing discussion that we need to have. But in this particular instance, for me, I've heard people, but I don't agree. I think we need to follow the experts. I'm concerned about the strains. And so for that particular for those reasons and others, I won't be supporting the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Oh, just briefly, and Councilmember Gray, I just want to make this because I think there are people, no taxpayer dollars go to UNMC for the expert's opinion. I believe they're giving it to us for free. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I think we would hear from people that we're paying. We have great experts and we may have hired them, but not at a monetary price. We've just asked them for their opinion. Because I wouldn't want any conflicts to be thrown out there. And I just want to put on the record, because I know I had a lot of people contact me. Mr. Jerem and I, on a daily basis, work with and have to identify whether we have conflicts on cases, on clients, on people that call us. I mean, just today over lunch, my partner called on in regards to somebody that contacted him. Is there a conflict with you being on the city council if we take this case? We frequently will call down to, we have specialists in ethics that we can call down in Lincoln to ask them if there's conflicts. And I just want to say that any council member has a conflict if we financially benefit, or somebody that we're close to, such as a spouse or our business, such as our law firms, if we would benefit in any way, that would create a conflict. And I know both Councilman Jerem and I have passed on certain votes for conflicts in the past. And I know Mr. Festerson has too, when there is a CHI, something on our agenda dealing with CHI where CHI benefits. And you've always recognized that. And actually with the help of our city clerk, occasionally they catch things that and call it to our attention ahead of time. You might have a conflict, you might want to look at this. But we do have a Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Committee in the state of Nebraska that whenever we do have a conflict, we send it down to them. And there have been times where I've thought I had a conflict and then they've sent me a letter back saying I don't. So, you know, we do have experts on that, and I don't believe that Mr. Festerson's opinion on masks in any way financially benefits CHI. If anything, if the masks work, they're losing patients, which I think we all think is a good thing. And so you may be losing money based on some of the COVID restrictions that we have. But again, I don't think that would be a conflict of interest. So I know, Mr. Festerson, we don't always agree on certain things, but I also think that I thought it was important that I share that and share my opinion on the conflict. So again, I appreciate the discussion. Councilman Gray, I would like to discuss this with you, and and now that we have the vaccine and we have the data provided to us by age group from Douglas County that, you know, Dr. Poor's staff puts together for us, and we look at the ages, and as we continue to see that maybe that matrix would include children, and so that maybe we take steps towards ending the mask mandate, as opposed, if we just do an all or nothing, we may have it forever. But maybe we look at taking steps based on phases, based on the data. So when we have the data that has kids under the age of 14 at 3.5% and kids under 10 at 1.2%, we might think about looking at those percentages to allow some exceptions so that we're not masking up kids that don't need it, that aren't spreading it, that aren't getting it when the percentages are that low. And then maybe we can look at increasing it, because even the ones under 19, they're at 7.2%, which is under your matrix, is still too high, right? But it's significantly lower than some of the other adults. So, I mean, we need to look at the data and base our metrics on the data and what's in the best interest. So I look forward to working with you on that, because I think the people that are against the mask mandates too, what I hear from people that don't want it at all is, well, at least tell me when it's gonna end. And so when you say I hear you and I don't agree, but maybe that is something we could agree on. Tell us when it's gonna end. And we should all agree to striving to have that end goal, to give everybody in our community at least, what do we need to do to get there? Because these arbitrary dates aren't giving anybody any solace. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. I would just add a few things too, because we've had this now so many times that I don't think that there's anything new, particularly substantive on the issues. The COVID-19 virus remains, in my opinion, and that of the experts in our community who are, as Councilmember Gray said, recognized as among the best experts in the world on infectious disease, a clear and present danger to the public health, safety, and welfare of citizens in our community across the spectrum of ages, from the youngest and most vulnerable of the youngest to the oldest. And therefore, I remain committed to supporting the original ordinance as written and will not be supporting the amendment as a whole as proposed, although I appreciate the conversation you wanted to have today. There's no further lights. There's a motion to approve the amendment as a whole, and a second. We didn't? I thought I heard a second. I thought, yeah. Okay, roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
No.
Motion failed 2-5.
Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 56, an ordinance to approve a major amendment to a mixed-use district development agreement for Pacific Springs Place located at 17909 Barker Court. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 56 begins at this time, and we have the applicant's representative, Mr. Duval, registered. Madam Clerk. Mr. Duval, please provide your name and address in your testimony.
Rob Duval, 1044 North 115th Street, Suite 300. I'm the civil engineer on the project representing Brakes Plus, who is the applicant.
Thank you, and you have your client with you available too, I see. And is he here for just questions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 57, an ordinance to rescind ordinance number 26821, creating a mall improvement district.
The public hearing on item 57 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 58, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for cutting and clearing weeds, grass, and worthless vegetation on certain lots in the city of Omaha, group 2021-03.
Public hearing on item 58 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 59, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for litter removal on certain lots in the city of Omaha, group 2021-04.
The public hearing on item 59 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 60, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for the removal and/or trimming of trees, bushes, shrubs, hedges, and other vegetation on certain lots in the city of Omaha, Group 2021-05.
The public hearing on item 60 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 61, an ordinance to approve the Tri-Mutual Aid Firefighters Association interlocal agreement for an initial term of 10 years.
The public hearing on item 61 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 62, an ordinance to approve a contract with Armored Knights, Inc. for the collection, transportation, and delivery of city funds for a period of 3 years.
The public hearing on item 62 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? You, sir, deserve a badge of commendation. You sat
Pardon?
through. You, sir, deserve a badge of commendation. You sat through the whole meeting. So congratulations and thank you. Your name and address and testimony, please.
James Venuto, 1010 Regency Parkway, and I'm from Armored Knights. I just want to thank the city for the opportunity of allowing us to bid on this. We currently handle Boys Town, Henry Dorley Zoo, Methodist Hospital, Omaha Public Schools, Millard Public Schools, Nebraska Humane Society, University of Nebraska at Omaha, City of Des Moines, City of Denver, Des Moines Public Schools, and I could go on. We handle about 800 schools each week. We're a small company. Our ownership is a family-owned company from Omaha. We're located in the near north side on 23rd and Jones, which is equivalent to 23rd and Hamilton. And we think we will do a good job for you, and we appreciate the opportunity to serve the city of Omaha. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 63, an ordinance providing for an amendment to the levy of a general business occupation tax for the Landmark Building.
The public hearing on item 63 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. Kevin Anderson, Deputy Chief of Staff in the Mayor's Office. In 2018, this body approved an ordinance approving $8.7 million of enhanced employment area occupation tax in support of the $62 million redevelopment of the Landmark Building. The applicant is here making a request to amend the tax structure of that $8.7 million award and time frame to respond to market changes since that time. I know Mr. Levy is here on behalf of the applicant, and I'll stick around for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Mr. President, council members, good afternoon. David Levy, Baird Home Law Firm, 1700 Farnham Street, here on behalf of the applicant. Just want to make a couple of quick points. Two things this amendment would not do is increase the total amount of tax potentially collected, and also would not extend the time over which that tax would be collected. What it does is adjust the percentages of tax among the land uses within the district to respond to construction delays caused by COVID and kind of the future of the hospitality industry after COVID. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Non-action items, items 64 through 73, do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and/or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Roll call.
Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Harding. Melton. Palermo. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 3:19.